Hey students, happy Sunday. I'm so happy to be with you guys tonight as we get to continue our sermon series. But first, let's talk about somebody super important. Most of you guys know that I have a wonderful, furry, crazy dog named Sailor. She is my best friend and the best dog in the whole entire world, and there's about a million different reasons that I say that. For example, some reasons of why she's the best include she always cuddles with me, she is super funny, she loves people, we go on walks together, and she never ever leaves me alone, which is very important to me. Here's what I mean. She even stays with me when she doesn't like it, right? Like she never leaves me alone. Never, never, never. And this is what I mean. For example, Sailor hates the vacuum. Absolutely hates it. Who else's dog hates the vacuum? Mine does. She runs away from the vacuum. She whines at the vacuum. She is so scared of the vacuum. But even if I'm vacuuming around the house, she still stays with me. She'll follow me into the rooms where I'm vacuuming, and she'll be scared and she'll be whiny, and she's clearly really nervous, but she would rather stay with me than leave me to experience vacuuming the house all by myself. Now, I know that's kind of a silly example, but you guys know that we are talking about injustice right now in our sermon series called Do Something. And tonight, we get to talk about a really important part of that conversation. Here's our big idea for tonight. When we see injustice happening, we can let those going through it know that they are not alone. Now, before we get too into the topic for tonight, I want you guys to pause the video and kind of recap what you learned from last week and start out really well. So go ahead and pause the video now and answer questions 1 and 2 on your discussion guides. Awesome. Okay, so fine. Maybe vacuuming is not an injustice. Fair enough, unless you want to talk about how unfair it is that I have to clean my house all the time. Ooh. Just kidding. Vacuuming's not an injustice, but the point is that Sailor still chooses, as my best doggy friend, to enter into something with me that she doesn't have to. She still chooses to be with me when she could choose also to run into a different room. She could choose to say, that's not my problem, I'm not the one that's vacuuming, or that's scary, I don't want to be in part of that, I don't want to go over there because I don't understand it, or I'm scared of that, or whatever other excuses in her little doggy mind that she could come up with. She chooses instead to be a good friend to me, to enter into something I'm experiencing that she doesn't have to experience so that I know I'm not alone. In a kind of similar way, when we see people going through injustice, we can let them know that they don't have to go through it alone either. It is a really important part of following Jesus, and one that we can see in all kinds of places in the Bible. And to share our scripture tonight, I brought along some visual aids because we have a lot of ground to cover tonight, students. Are you ready? Okay, fantastic. I hope you said yes. One of those places is the book of Daniel. We have fantastic artwork tonight, students. Daniel is a book in the Old Testament, and the Old Testament is a collection of books all about people trying to follow God before Jesus was born. Daniel tells the story of a guy named Daniel. You guessed it, right? Daniel, very original. Who was trying to follow God even when his circumstances made it really, really hard. Daniel also had some friends. Who do you think Daniel's friends were named? I bet some of you remember this story if you went to kids' church before. I never knew the story when I was a kid, so I can tell you. Daniel's friends were named Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Everyone say Shadrach, everyone say Meshach, everyone say Abednego. I can't tell if you did it because I'm not there in person with you, so I hope you did it. Thank you. Wonderful job. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were Daniel's friends who were trying to follow God too. But there was also this super crazy king named King Nebuchadnezzar. See, he's so mean and terrible. There's also this crazy king named Nebuchadnezzar. He captured Daniel and his friends and all the other Jewish people and threw them into captivity. Terrible. Absolutely terrible. So one day, Nebuchadnezzar is so crazy. One day he decides he's going to build a gigantic golden statue of himself. It's 90 feet tall. I can't even. 90 feet tall. One golden statue of himself. Okay, that's what King Nebuchadnezzar decided to do. And not only that, he told every person who lived in his kingdom that when they heard this certain kind of music, they had to bow down and worship the gold statue of Nebuchadnezzar. And if they didn't, they were going to get thrown into a blazing hot furnace to get burned to death. Okay? Very intense. So ridiculous. That's a lot, right? So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, like I said, they were trying to follow God. These guys were following God, Yahweh. And they said, we are not going to bow down to this golden Nebuchadnezzar statue because we only bow down to God, right? So they refuse. They hear the music. Everyone's bowing down. But those three said, we're not going to do it. So when King Nebuchadnezzar found out, of course, what does he do? He goes into a furious rage and says, throw them in the fire. It was a big bummer. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, because they wouldn't bow down and worship the golden statue of King Nebuchadnezzar, had to get thrown into the fiery furnace. Wah, wah, wah. Insane, right? Now, we can all agree that that is completely unfair. They didn't deserve that. They did nothing that would have warranted them getting thrown into a fire. It wasn't fair. They didn't deserve it. It wasn't right. Kind of like when we see people experiencing injustice. That's not fair. They don't deserve that. That's not right. So, what happened? Let's pick up our reading from the Bible. We're going to keep going with our story and see what the rest has to tell us. Daniel chapter 3, we're going to read from verses 24 through 27 tonight. So they're in the fire. Verse 24, then King Nebuchadnezzar jumped up in shock and said to his three associates, didn't we throw 3 men bound into the fire? Verse 24, they answered the king, certainly, your majesty. Verse 25, he replied, look, I see 4 men unbound walking around inside the fire, and they aren't hurt. Look, they're having a good old time. They're happy in there. 4 men. And the 4th man looks like one of the gods. Nebuchadnezzar went near the opening of the furnace of the flaming fire and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out. Come here. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire. The chief administrators, ministers, governors, and the king's associates crowded around to look at them. The fire, listen to this, guys, hadn't done anything to them. Their hair wasn't singed. Their garments looked the same as before. You know, if you've ever been around a campfire and a little spark comes up and gets on your shirt or something, you know that it'll at least leave a mark, right? Their clothes didn't even have any marks from being thrown into a furnace of fire. They didn't even smell like fire. Pretty crazy, right? Okay, so pause the video now and answer question 3 in your discussion guides to talk about what we just read. Awesome. Now, we're not entirely sure who was in the fire with the men. Was it God? Was it Jesus? Was it an angel? I really don't know. But one thing I do know is that this story shows us that God did not leave Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to go through their situation alone. Somehow God was with them. He didn't leave them to experience that injustice by themselves, and that's a big deal because it shows us that the same goes for us and our friends today. When we see someone experiencing injustice, when we ourselves are going through an injustice, we know that God is with us. And because we're followers of God and we're followers of Christ, we get to follow in that example. This is what that means, you guys. When we see someone going through injustice, we can let them know that they are not alone. With that in mind, pause the video and talk about question 4 in your discussion guides. Awesome. Students, I probably don't have to tell you that there are a lot of injustices happening in our world today. People are treated differently because of the color of their skin or because of their gender. People who can't afford fancy cars and clothes are treated as less than people who can. Maybe kids at your school are bullied, mistreated, or picked on because of some of those exact things. Some people in our very own communities, you guys, don't even have food on their tables, or they've found themselves in situations where people are hurting them, physically, mentally, or emotionally. There are some cities and neighborhoods in our country, our state, our area that have plenty of resources. They have everything they need, more than enough. But then you can drive a little ways down and see that other neighborhoods don't have everything that they need. That's injustice. Students, that's not fair, that's not right, and no one deserves that. And while there are a lot of injustices in our world today, with Jesus, there's also a lot of hope. And for someone experiencing injustice, some of that hope might come from a person just like you, coming alongside them, standing with them, and saying, you aren't in this alone. You aren't in this alone. Just like God didn't let Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego experience their injustice alone, we can follow God's example and show those around us that they don't have to experience injustice alone either. How do you do that, right, in everyday life? Well, some things might be kind of simple. You can stand up for a kid that's getting bullied, or if you see someone sitting at lunch alone, you can go and sit with them if they don't have anyone to sit with. When you hear somebody making a joke at the expense of another person, their color, the color of their skin, their gender, what they have or don't have, you can follow God's example and show them that they are not alone by not laughing at that joke. You can stand up to the person making the joke and you can say, that's not funny, and I'm not going to laugh at that. When you get your allowance or you get your paycheck from your after-school job, you could decide to donate some of that to an organization that's helping to fight against injustice. There's this awesome organization that Anona gets to partner with called Hope Villages of America, and they get to serve so many people in our community who need help getting some resources or having a safe place to stay. And those kind of organizations you can donate money to. And in that way, you're showing people in those situations that they aren't alone, that even if you've never met them, you care enough to try and help. Students, you can listen to people that share their stories about injustice that they have endured, and you can believe people when they tell you that they've gone through something like that, even if it's something you will never understand or you've never gone through. You can use your voice to show support about issues that you care about. You can use your voice to make a change in your own school, in your own friend group, in your own neighborhood, or after school sport, or all the other things that you are a part of. You can show people who are going through injustice that they are not alone. Now, as we start to wrap up our conversation tonight, students, I'd like you to turn to your discussion guides and talk through questions 5, 6, and 7 to keep this conversation going. Awesome. Students, one of the amazing things about God is that He's always with us. He loves us, and He doesn't leave us to experience things on our own, especially things like injustice. And we, as followers of Christ, get to follow that example and show others that they are not alone when they're experiencing injustice. It is a huge part of us following Jesus on our Christian journey, and it's one that I hope you will consider stepping into. Remember, when it comes to injustice and we see it happening, we can let people know that they're not alone. Have a great rest of your small group, and I'll see you soon.